When South Central arrived in theaters in 1992, most viewers thought they were watching a story about redemption. A father fighting to save his son. A man leaving prison determined not to repeat the past. A community trapped between violence and survival. But here's the uncomfortable question most people never asked. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling? Did those powerful performances translate into real stability? Or did the struggle on screen quietly continue off it? Because when the spotlight faded, the truth turned out to be far more complicated and far more revealing than the film itself. A film that felt real because it was. South Central wasn't just another early 90s gang drama. It arrived at a moment when Hollywood was finally allowing raw, unfiltered urban stories into the mainstream. No easy endings. No polished heroes. Just consequences. The story followed Bobby Johnson, a former gang leader freshly released from prison, trying desperately to stop his son from inheriting the same violent fate. It was brutal, honest, and emotionally exhausting. But here's the question worth asking now. If this story exposed how hard it is to escape the streets, why did we assume the actors escaped Hollywood's version of the same trap? Because many of them didn't. Carl Lumbly, the wisdom that came at a cost. Carl Lumbly gave South Central its quiet moral gravity. At 41, he played Ollie, the inmate whose wisdom felt earned, not scripted. What most people never saw was how hard Lumbly had fought just to be taken seriously. Years of typecasting. Long stretches without work. Financial stress that followed him even as his talent was undeniable. Ask yourself this. What does it do to a person to know they're excellent at their craft, yet constantly overlooked? Personal loss compounded the struggle. His first wife, actress Vonetta McGee, died of cancer. Later relationships suffered under the pressure of an unforgiving industry. Health concerns followed as he aged. Today, in his 70s, Lumbly is respected, active, and financially stable, but recognition came decades late. Was the price worth it? Glenn Plummer, the lead who wasn't allowed to lead. Glenn Plummer didn't just play South Central. For many viewers, he was South Central. When the film released, audiences saw something rare, a black leading man who carried both strength and vulnerability without apology. At just 31 years old, Plummer's portrayal of Bobby Johnson felt like a breakthrough moment, one of those performances that usually launches a career into permanent leading man territory. The kind that changes everything. And yet, it didn't. Hollywood noticed him, yes. He went on to appear in major productions, Menace to Society, Speed, Showgirls. These weren't small projects. These were box office films, cultural touchstones. His performances were solid, sometimes even scene-stealing. But something invisible kept happening. He was always close, but never quite there. Always working, but rarely advancing. Which raises a question few fans stop to ask. How many leading roles were actually available to someone like Glenn Plummer? And more importantly, who decided that? Behind the scenes, the pressure accumulated. Acting isn't just auditions and premieres, it's uncertainty. Months without work. Sudden travel. Long absences from home. Over time, the emotional cost became personal. His marriage collapsed under the strain. Later, a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes added another layer of daily discipline and stress. Now in his 60s, Glenn Plummer has something many actors never achieve: longevity. A long resume. Respect from peers. But not the financial security or cultural elevation people assumed would come automatically. So what is that, really? Success or endurance? Lexi Bigham, a career interrupted, not failed. Some stories never get a second act, not because they weren't worthy, but because time ran out. Lexi Bigham was in his early 20s when he appeared in Boys in the Hood and South Central. He had the look, the presence, the timing. Hollywood was watching. Momentum was building. The future felt wide open. But here's the uncomfortable truth about early 90s Hollywood. The window for young black actors was brutally small. You didn't get years to figure it out. You didn't get endless chances to reinvent yourself. You either caught fire fast, or the door quietly closed. Lexi never got the chance to test how far he could go. In 1995, he died in a car accident at just 27 years old. No scandal. No downfall. No cautionary tale. Just a life, and a career, that never reached its full shape. And that loss isn't just personal. It's cultural. How many roles were written that we'll never see performed? How many stories were meant for someone like him, but arrived too late? Ivory Ocean and Tim DeKay, daily the cost of being reliable. Ivory Ocean's appearance in South Central lasted only seconds, but it burned into memory. One moment. One look. One line that carried weight. He was a trained theater actor, disciplined, serious about his craft. Hollywood noticed his professionalism. And that was both a blessing and a trap. Ivory worked consistently, appearing in major films like The Mask and The Fifth Element. He showed up. He delivered. He was dependable. But dependable doesn't always mean protected. As the years passed, health issues mounted. Roles became fewer. Financial stability never fully arrived. When he passed away in his 60s, it wasn't poverty, but it wasn't comfort either. Decades of work, modest security. Then there's Tim DeKay, often credited as Tim Daly early on, a man whose face audiences instantly recognize. He was cast repeatedly as intimidating figures, authority, menace, power. Films like Fight Club, Spider-Man, Deadwood. Always present. Always working. But rarely evolving. Typecasting isn't just artistic, it's psychological. When the industry only wants one version of you, it slowly erases the rest. Then life delivered a blow no role could prepare him for, the loss of his teenage son in a car accident. A grief that never fully leaves. A pain that follows you onto every set. Consistent work, yes. Upward mobility. Almost never. The women who had to reinvent themselves to survive. Hollywood has always demanded flexibility from women. From black women, it demands disappearance or reinvention. Actors like Vaseline Reynolds, Starletta DuPois, and Loretta Shelby gave emotional grounding to stories filled with violence and chaos. They brought humanity to the margins. They made the narratives breathe. But once filming ended, the phone stopped ringing. Not because they lacked talent. Not because audiences rejected them. But because the industry decided their chapter was complete. So they pivoted. One returned to theater and wrote her own acclaimed musical, refusing to wait for permission. Another balanced stage work, television, and serious health challenges, redefining what a sustainable career could look like. Another took control of her voice through military broadcasting, reaching audiences in more than 50 countries, impact without a red carpet. And here's the uncomfortable question. Why does reinvention get celebrated as resilience, when it was actually survival? Supporting players, permanent margins. Most actors don't become stars. They become dependable. Byron Mins. Baldwin Sykes. Kevin Best. Vincent Klein. Faces you recognize instantly. Names that rarely appear above the title. They worked steadily, often in films that shaped culture. Films that sparked conversations. Films that still get watched decades later. Yet many lived paycheck to paycheck. Some turned to writing and producing just to regain control. Others accepted smaller roles to stay visible, hoping relevance would buy them time. Is that failure? Or is that the hidden majority of Hollywood, the part no one glamorizes? The bigger picture no one wanted to see. Here's where everything connects. Collectively, the cast of South Central appeared in films that generated hundreds of millions of dollars. And yet, combined, their estimated net worths barely approach what one franchise star can earn from a single movie. Why? Because Hollywood operates on ceilings. Set long before auditions begin. Ceilings shaped by race, by age, by gender, by marketability defined in boardrooms far removed from lived experience. And the most dangerous illusion of all? The industry convinces you that if you're not succeeding, it's your fault. Not the system. Not the barriers. You. The twist no one expected, and why it matters. You may have heard the rumors. Stories about a cast member ending up on death row. A life darker than the film itself. Here's the truth most fans never uncovered. That story was never real. There was no death row case. And that matters, because the lie mirrors the treatment these actors received. Sensationalized for attention. Discarded once the value was extracted. The death row wasn't literal. It was professional. Careers stalled. Security denied. Dreams slowly suffocated. The legacy that outlived the industry. And yet, this is where the story turns. They didn't vanish. They mentored younger artists. They created their own work. They adapted, pivoted, and refused to disappear quietly. South Central still matters. It's studied, discussed, remembered. Not because Hollywood rewarded it, but because the people inside it told the truth. So the real question isn't, what happened to the cast? The real question is, how many stories like this are unfolding right now, just out of sight? That's what most fans never figured out.